welcome. You're watching QTV and you're watching the Week in Review. I'm Ade Darami, your host, and my co-host across the room from me, Mahmoud Mboj. Mr. Mboj, once again, we're here. Welcome to the program.
Thanks. Nice to be back.
And it's good to be back again. And across the room there, we have Lamindi Sonko doing the signing. Now, anybody joining us for the first time, you're wondering what's the show all about? There's a very good reason why we call it the Week in Review. We review 10 big stories from the week just gone by, and we kick them around. And I always need to issue a word of warning now, because people say, oh, spending a lot on that story. Guess what? Some stories deserve a lot more time than others. Okay, we got that out of the way. Let's have the menu, shall we? Gambia, Senegal, our forces have been on a joint patrol recently. We'll have a look at that and we'll discuss it in some detail. The 15th batch of the National Youth Service Scheme, just been, yes, 15th batch, just been sworn in. And also Halifa Sallah, veteran politician. He's got some ideas on how we need to shake up the system politically here in the Gambia. Artificial intelligence, AI, ChatGPT, and some people are getting it to do all their work for them, and they're submitting those papers and getting good results. Is this the end of study as we really know it? Also, something very unusual for the Gambia, plea bargaining. Yes, very common in America, particularly in other Western countries. They're thinking of bringing it here. Can it work? Will it work? We'll find out. And also, World Mental Health Day was commemorated here in the Gambia. And just finally, some of our Paralympians and Olympians was celebrated by the British High Commissioner at the British High Commission here in the Gambia. Just some of the stories on tonight's show. So let's get cracking, shall we? First up, I mentioned Gambia, Senegal. We always talk about brotherly relations, etc. And of course, geography has made us inseparable, one might say. And so recently, our joint forces went on a border patrol. Here's some of what they had to say.
We want to take this opportunity to thank and appreciate the gallant men who participated in this crucial exercise along the borders of Senegal and the Gambia. I am truly delighted and at a loss for words after witnessing the dedication these soldiers displayed during the operation. This is exactly what we aspire to, togetherness. When we stand united, we can achieve greater success. It is only through such cooperation that we can effectively protect our borders from all forms of crime and infiltration.
We're inseparable, aren't we? Senegal has the Gambia in a geographical embrace, one that is impossible to escape. And of course, that means cooperation such as this to man, and we've banned this word in the newsroom, those porous borders. It's inevitable, aren't they, Mr. Mboj?
Oh, absolutely. And when you take our relationship, it's easier in some areas to cooperate and the like than in others, isn't it? That sort of thing. And this joint patrol, it's more symbolic, really, isn't it? Because again, when I saw that, I said, of course, but symbolism, of course, is important in international relations, perhaps even in politics generally. There's no denying that. But let's just understand it for what it is. Because the way I think about these things is that I hope that we've got a sort of permanent task force that periodically, but consistently, patrols the border and that sort of thing, isn't it? The longer term solution will come from that, isn't it? So maybe they do have that, I do not know. But yes, we agree with the symbolism. We need these things. That's how to cement the relationships, but we shouldn't forget the substantive stuff in the end that would make it work.
Well, this is it, because I think you mentioned both politically and also on the kind of international scale, it sends a message, but also I think to the communities that live on those borders, because they're talking about, clamping down, cracking down on illegal activities. They need to know that this is a kind of joint effort. It's not left to one side or the other on either side of this border.
Precisely, the solidarity to reassure, as it were, the people that, we are working on this together and the like, and it's a priority and stuff. That's why I said that is very important. In politics, you need something like that. But really, in the end, because you don't want to sort of foster cynicism, it is when you do not deliver, when they realize that their lives are not safer now than before. You see, it just depends on the reality.
Yes.
Otherwise, that reassurance can consolidate itself, or it can crash into cynicism and say nothing will happen. So it just depends on how you do things.
And this is it, and we need to put it in its proper context, because you said right at the beginning there that there are certain areas where it is good and it's almost inevitable. Because we know that even though we always talk about being brothers and this and that, there's a real rivalry there, but also there's a kind of resentment when it comes to things like trade, cross-border trade. The cooperation is virtually non-existent, although on paper it's there. But, you know, everybody's protecting his or her own territory when it comes to that. And so there isn't that. But whenever we have these things, they always sing the praises as if it's good in every area, but it's not, is it?
Absolutely, because when it comes to trade, or even transportation, transport, you know, we've seen recently, we've covered in the news recently, the sort of problem between the two. When it comes to the level of the nation state, other imperatives would bear on decisions and relationships and the like.
Indeed.
But at bottom, you see, this is it. I was reading one paper on our relationship, but it's quite curious. I said, but at bottom, they've never really gone to war. And it is true that they share values. So whenever there's a problem, they can solve it quickly without going to war.
True.
So this person, this analyst, calls it fence-mending diplomacy. Quite extraordinary. And when you think about it, that's it. From independence.
That's right. It's not always been smooth. There have been rough patches, but it's never escalated into anything beyond.
As what, 74, 75, something like that. South Africa, Jawara complained to the Secretary General of the UN about Senegal, their intentions. Because with us in the beginning, we were scared that we were going to be absorbed into Senegal. But we didn't want that. That was quite curious. So that's it. Since then, we've been having all sorts of problems, issues, one sort or another, even the football war, we call it that. And the more serious one, this is really where the main challenge is Casamance.
Inevitable.
Yes. Some time back, didn't they intercept shipment of arms from Iran, intercepted in Nigeria, apparently bound for Casamance. So this is the key. And then we're having these joint patrols in the Casamance region with this one. But again, Senegal, the central government in Dakar, is sort of at war. It's in a conflict situation with the Casamance, what do they call themselves? I wouldn't call them, that's it, rebels. Separatists, fine, I prefer that. But we don't want to be involved militarily. So it's quite tricky. How do we manage that? That needs careful, skillful management. Because we have a relationship with Senegal, the central government. That's really what the key is. But again, the border is too close. We really do not want to get involved in that. So how do we manage it?
A tricky one. And as I said to the viewers at the start there, some stories demand a bit more than this is one of those. Thank you for that, Mr. Mboj. And now, up next, the 15th batch of the National Youth Service scheme volunteers have been sworn in, and a very colourful ceremony it was too. Have a look, have a listen.
The objective of the NYSS Skills Acquisition Training is to provide young people the opportunity of acquiring skills training from different institutions on any of the skill areas of their choice, to seek employment opportunities and also to create self-employment opportunities for themselves.
The main highlight of the ceremony was the swearing-in, led by Justice Narcisse Salawada of the Court of Appeal. The Oath of Allegiance is a declaration of their commitment to the nation.
And myself.
So there we heard the Oath of Allegiance, Mr. Mboj, but also something there in the report which was noticeable, skills acquisition. It's a slightly different element to what had previously been the thrust of this scheme, isn't it?
Absolutely, and that was interesting there, particularly with the Oath of Allegiance. To my mind, it puts a different dimension to it. Of course, you're going to have the acquisition of skills, be it in carpentry, plumbing, mechanics, and all the rest of it. But this is about service.
Yes.
isn't
to
it?
the nation.
How do we foster the ethos of public service? The oath of allegiance, when you're really loyal to it, you say you have to go back home and really think about it. What have I done there? You know what I mean?
Well, that's right.
Then that will perhaps guide the ethics, the actions, which is so significant. But there, we're just emphasizing on you're going to get employment.
Either you get a job or you'll
start your own. We understand that.
Yeah, quite.
But they must go with something else. We've seen really what the problem is. Post-independence Africa, we've absolutely seen it. We've turned public service into a corruption industry. Everybody, that's really what it is.
I had a row with somebody in the office. It's the only way I can describe it. When we were discussing the presidency, and he said nobody should be a president for 2 or 3 terms and stand down as president and not be richer than when he became the president. I was horrified. I was absolutely horrified.
Absolutely.
And he was being serious. He wasn't saying it, he wasn't kind of playing devil's advocate. He actually meant it. And I said, the presidency, you're not talking about a business. You're talking about serving the nation. Absolutely. Why should the person be richer than when they were, you know, an ordinary citizen or whatever? I could not believe what I was hearing.
Absolutely. It's as if the ideals of that independence generation, really, at some point something happened, it was derailed, or I don't know, the bloodstream was poisoned somehow.
Or the water was poisoned. Because, you know, I've bored people with the fact that, you know, I was born in England, but for the longest time until I went back, I keep saying back, I went to Sierra Leone at the age of 5 with my parents. All we heard about was that they needed to go back because the country was striving for independence and they wanted to be part of the effort to build their country and make it something great. That was what drove them to go back as soon as they finished their studies.
Absolutely.
And you know.
I keep telling people in the 80s, recently in the 80s when people went out, you know, you ask, where is this or where is that? Or gone to England to study.
Quite.
Not hustling or anything
not to
else.
Go,
after your degree, they returned.
You wanted to come back.
So there was that. But now it's completely the other way. Most people now would really want to leave. They don't want to come back. But again, you do not blame them to some extent because of in the intervening years from independence to now. You've seen what happened. Cynicism now has really set in. We really do not see any prospects. That is why some families would go and sell their properties and all the rest of it, pay for their kids to go back away. This is about the prospect, not seeing any prospects. That's how dark they are.
And hardly any of them tell you that it's because I want my child to go and study and come back. No. It's I want my child to go there and remit money back.
And be remit, that's sending money. Now that's the sort of relationship, that's the dominant.
So back to the youth scheme, it's about service.
It is about service. So they go together, really. And every job, as it were, has got this sort of vocation, its own ethics, as it were. That's really how you can get the optimum, you know, out of that. So it's important to emphasize this because that's really the canker in the body politic.
Sure. Thanks. It's a nice one. And if any of you are among that 15th batch, besides reciting the oath, go back and read it slowly and digest it. And you'll see the real skill and the essence of what the oath is all about. Thank you for that, Mr. Mbodj. Now, story number 3. A political veteran, I think we can safely call him that, Halifa Sallah, recently held a press conference and he gave forth on a number of topics. And he talked about systemic change. And he was talking about in the body politic. Here's a snippet of what he had to say.
We are convinced that the people are not satisfied with the change that took place in 2016 and its aftermath. Since they are not satisfied, it is for them to tell us why they are not satisfied and what type of Gambia they want. When they answer that question, they will also know the type of leadership they want. We are ready to move as a leadership to engage in a countrywide tour, starting from the 20th of October up to the 31st, to meet our members, to meet the leadership of the party in the regions, as well as the citizens of the country, to engage in a national conversation on the future of this country.
And the nation, this national conversation since DOI was formed. Why now? Why all these years later?
Oh,
if I can start with that one.
With Doi, we've been having one kind of conversation or another since they came into being in 1956, especially through their organ, the newspaper organ, Foroya. So they've been really very important, really, to the awakening, people of my generation, our political awakening, really, to the big three when they came, Sidia Jatta and Samsar and the like. So they've been sort of making all sorts of influences. They've had all sorts of influences on us. But as a political party, it's really not been able to do much, as it were, because apparently it seems as if it's got this ideology and it wants to be pure to its ideology. It doesn't want to get its hands dirty to play the politics of electability. You do have these different approaches to politics. True. Some parties do want to, the purity of the ideology is more important than getting your hands and feet dirty to be electable.
Well, this is it.
That is a curious thing.
And somebody, again, when we were discussing this, said, but, you know, when he was offered a position in government, he turned it down. I said, yes, because it wasn't in keeping with his ideology and his ideals.
And apparently they had agreed something, that the leaders of the parties wouldn't take executive positions, ministerial positions.
That's right.
I think they wanted to make it sort of a cabinet of technocrats, get technocrats and others, because it was a transitional government, 3 years, then we'll go to the polls again and the like. Of course, it never works out, the plan never works out when you go into power. But this is it. So he should have really adapted when suspects go into government, show them how to run a government department.
In the way that he used to show them how to run the National Assembly when they were always making mistakes.
Absolutely. Yes. Because we've seen sort of the organizational chaos in many ways. Sure. We are suffering Jammeh's dismembering of what we had before, the bureaucracy we had. So this is why we are in this transition, isn't it, to change it. Some of us thought that it wouldn't take this long, but I think we underrated the scale of the problem, so it will take a bit longer. So this is it. And what did he say in 2022? Didn't he sort of say that he was going to step down from some kind of
in terms of putting himself up for election? So, but he wasn't
going on
he wasn't
now.
completely leaving the stage.
Oh, absolutely, one understands that. But if I'm not going to contest, I'm done with that. We're going to have elections, in 2026? When are we going to start to unveil what is going to happen? We need to do that early-ish so that you have time for people to know this person and how they're going to do it. So what is going on?
Exactly.
We'll see. Maybe we'll know during this
the nationwide tour. But that's exactly the debate that sprung up in the office. But I guess we'll wait and see come the tour. But thank you for that, Mr. Hambodge. Story number 4, a very different story. Artificial intelligence, AI, as it's kind of become abbreviated these days, just in the same way that we don't say automatic telling machine anymore. We just say ATM. And also ChatGPT. I was genuinely surprised at how widely used it is here in the Gambia, and one of my journalists approached me and said, I want to do a story about this because it's becoming, to quote her, rampant. What are we talking about? Have a listen to this snippet and you'll get an idea.
This is a new generation, we are changing, and ChatGPT is here to make life easy.
You just copy and paste, then submit your assignment.
I feel like it makes me feel lazy, I won't focus, and it makes my brain to relax.
Pause, guilty smiles and nervous glances around. But let's dig deeper. AI tools like ChatGPT, designed to assist with writing, answering questions, and providing creative solutions, have become a crutch for some Gen Z students. From social media captions to homework and even work tasks, many seem to rely heavily or entirely on this digital assistant. On TikTok, students proudly thank ChatGPT for getting them through graduation, with some even crediting it for saving their lives.
Mr. Hambodge, I'm going to show my age by saying that how horrified I am at what ChatGPT has done to this generation. And in case anybody doesn't know me, I'm somebody who I've always prided myself on being able to find the unfindable when it comes to research, to do, whether I'm writing an article, a letter, whatever. And to now think that all of that, I just have to put in some prompts. In case anybody doesn't know how it works, you said, I would like to solve this problem. What's the best solution for this problem? And then it spits out an answer. You copy that answer. You don't even read it sometimes, probably. And you send it off, you think, oh, and then you get good marks. You think, hey, why should I ever have to think for myself? That's where we are now.
Absolutely. Education being very utilitarian, you know what I mean? Yeah. It's just what I can use,
what I can use to pass an
exam, to pass and that sort
without
of thing.
Doing any work.
Everything else is gone.
Yeah.
And when the student said, we are changing, so my immediate question was, from what to what?
To what, yes.
It's important for that
are
young...
Are we changing for the better?
Are we changing for the better?
They didn't say that.
That's a change in itself. It's sort of neutral in many ways. You can change for the better or change for the worse. Yeah. So go back and reflect on what you're moving away from.
Yeah.
What was it like?
Yeah.
What are we going to?
Yeah.
There's been some mixed studies. I went online to look at now. They're sort of conducting studies to see the effect of these AI-generated tools, as it were, on academic performance.
Yes, yes.
Some of them, some results so far say that they really sort of not good. They don't improve your academic performance at all.
Because there's no human thought.
That's it. You're not thinking about it.
You're not putting yourself in the research.
You know, going into it. So. But you have others, there are other studies sort of suggesting that, but there are other aspects of you that are being improved. I think this will possibly rumble on because it's new. There are various studies being done.
Yes,
and it is important that we get the information, the data from the field, as it were, that will guide our policy. Yes. Otherwise, we'll just be doing things based on our impressions. That is dangerous. Yes. I'm not into that. Or anecdotes from that is also dangerous. It's good to wait for the statistical data that will give us a clearer picture. Then we'll know how public policy can try to dampen, lessen its worst effects.
Yeah, quite.
But you better know them first.
There's a man, Professor Jeffrey something, I wish I could remember his name. You see, if I'd used AI, it would remind me. And he's being referred to as the father of AI. And he's been, in the last year, giving these interviews, talking about how it will take over from human beings.
I think I've been reading a lot of articles these years, really, about AI. Yes. Some people are really quite scared of its potential.
To take over, and he's one of those. And in fact, the person who posted the first one I saw was kind of making fun of it, saying, well, you started this and now you're saying it's getting out of hand. And he was saying that it's getting out of hand because he says we're now relying on it to do things that we should be doing because, you know, it just takes the burden away from us, including it taking the burden away of thinking about things.
I don't know. Maybe this is what technology has always done. It will come and sort of solve certain things, as it were. But again, the fact that I don't have to think about that anymore, that might generate new imperatives. You know what I mean? Man, the mind, society goes in a different direction. Because the moral bits, they're like rubber balls, aren't they?
This is it.
They will always come back and they will demand.
Well, this is part of what he was saying, because he was giving the kind of doomsday scenario as to when we start putting them in charge of our weapons. They will make a decision to attack another country and you won't be able to stop it because the machine has decided that that's the right thing to do. It's done its calculations and it's going to release the weapons and you don't even have to touch anything, and then who knows where that might lead.
That's a very, very scary
well, and that's the kind of scenario.
Very scary prospect. And that's it. So what's going to happen? How do they control it? We know that the politicians are really working on this in the West anyway. And how do you control big tech, be it Facebook and all the rest of them, and AI, how do you control it? So I do not know, Ade, but I'll say this. I remember the millennium bug. that worst case scenario, everything was going to shut down.
Please don't mention it because I actually worked at the Cabinet Office at the time, and some of us, many of us, and I'm talking about several hundred of us, had to stay in the office that night to make sure that the world, it was a nonsensical notion, and I always thought it was, and I'm not saying this with hindsight. At the time I kicked against it. I thought it was idiotic. You mean we can program computers to take us to the moon, but we can't tell them to change a date just because it has some zeros in it? Total rubbish, but people bought into the nonsense.
If you look in history, really the worst case scenarios that man has sort of apparently using knowledge and saying this is what is. Apparently in the, I don't know, 20s, 30s or whatever, it was about the big, what do you call it, the big freeze.
You're right, it's quite,
now we call it climate warming.
Quite.
But there was a time when they thought that there would be the big freeze.
This is true.
I'm not sort of trying to be sort of, I don't know, dismissive of what the power of AI and all the rest of it. But again, I'm not going to go too far with this worst case scenario. There's nothing inevitable about it.
Well, this is
this is really, it's not inexorable. The potential exists.
It's there.
But I'm not sure whether inevitably will lead ourselves. I'm not sure. I've got nothing to lead me there.
I said to somebody that as long ago as the 1970s, I sat on a plane and both the pilots came out of the cockpit and started chatting to us, and we said, who's flying the plane? And they said it's on automatic. So this is not new. We talk about it as being new, but it's not. And this is just the kind of latest iteration of that, but one that we have to watch.
Yes.
Thank you for that, Mr. Mboj. And next, story number 5, which will also take us to the midway point in terms of stories at least. The judiciary here in the Gambia, they've been looking at using plea bargaining. What's plea bargaining, I hear you ask? This might tell you.
In many cases, plea bargaining can spare victims and witnesses the emotional and psychological toll of a full trial. By resolving cases earlier, it may offer them closure and a sense of justice without having to relieve trauma through lengthy court proceedings.
Plea bargaining has its critics. One of the most significant concerns is the potential for coercion. This can occur where defendants, especially those without adequate legal representation,
the possibility of coercion, go on, take a plea and you'll get a lighter sentence. And you think, and then you do. So it's not, but as I said, and the people who came here to advise inevitably are from the United States, where this has been the way of things for God knows how long. But it would be very, very unusual should we adopt it here in the Gambia.
What you've just said, the possibility of coercion, that is why it's got really so many detractors.
Well, indeed, and there are many.
So many parts of the world. Yet it is used fairly commonly in many parts of the world. Perhaps we have to be careful, where do we apply it?
In what sorts of cases?
What cases, that's it, that sort of thing. And be watchful, to be forewarned is to be forearmed, isn't it? Because you know of these dangers, how do we sort of try to mitigate the worst effects of
Well, that's right, and having lived so long in the United Kingdom, I mean, and they see how loosely it is used in the United States. 5 of us could commit a crime, and one of us decides to be a snitch and snitch on the others. There's no reason to tell that that person's part in the crime might have been worse than any of the others that he's snitching on, and they all get sent out and he gets to walk away free.
Absolutely.
And that's one of the things that's happening. But so in case anybody in the Gambia is not sure, but that's the kind of scenario where you say, I will accept a plea, I will admit to having been involved in return for either a reduced sentence, or I can turn state's evidence, for example, against my co-conspirators, and I get to walk away in many cases.
You get one concession or another.
Quite.
So this is it. So we can all see the potential flaws in this.
Sure.
but again, when you take our context, just too many cases, and we don't have the capacity to deal.
And that's why they're thinking about going down what would have been 20 years ago, the unthinkable.
Absolutely.
But now there are just too many. The cases, the courts are clogged up, and we need to release that. And one way might be with things like this, when avoiding lengthy trials.
That's it. So you balance two things. You balance the principle and the practicality of it, isn't it? The practicality must not really drive policy to the exclusion of the policy, the principles, isn't it? You cannot do that. So how do we marry, the practical stuff and the principle? We wouldn't forget that. Sure. So perhaps with some cases, it's easier to go for plea bargaining.
Oh, that's right.
But perhaps in others, we shouldn't allow it because of other concerns. We want things to go to court, maybe for accountability purposes and other things, really. Even for public policy reasons. We do all sorts of things. So it just depends on how you introduce it.
And so in case anybody's panicking, it's not around the corner, they're just thinking about it. At this point, we'll take a break, and after the break, we will have 5 more stories. Don't go away. Join us after the break.
Mfalantinga kiu mobile na afali nang miya lonko ay tarela duniyato asuniata bake andu nyi mobile ni fennel nata miya lonko kwa betiata na baluoto bake battery nyi se samanu fo tilisaba andung atajila a mobile nyi radio fanan sotole lampo fanan ba nyi mobile tole ay memory card slot fanan sotole double sim long ikamune batu ta na kiusel bundato mi sutiyate la bi yenela mobile kenda ma soto miya lonko adaba diaring bake dala si keme woro damma isela kiw mobile soto no bi ani bonus package la nata miya lonko iba minute keme saba hapo diamulale anin keme saba sms nyimbe sambala kare saba konto konole andum ita fenjola momo lafta kuma ko yo moyela nyinto isa na customer care bunjulola ni 111 Qcell sunyu boss ntolle silo wala doli abulan noma nyindung anin sartolle nata
join the Q money.
Zainab
korke dama yakam
Zainab kay Zainab kay yow fooy dem naaj bu tàng bi looy daw
sama car gis nga moto bi taxaw na fi poste bi lay dawale nii ndax mun a yóbbante sama mbokk yu nekk Sénégal xaalis mu ci gaawee
Zainab xanaa yow nekkuloo Gambia Zainab kay déglu ma wax la ma ne looy def yomb na soo amee sa Q money mun ngaa yónnee ko amee Orange Money Sénégal xaalis mu dem si kalpeem bi Orange Money cullung from Q money to Orange Money mu ne fa cullung
looy wax nii
waaw yomb na te gaaw na
lii de neex na fan laa mun a gaaw ndax def mun a def transaction
looy def mooy transaction bi loo ko def yomb na demal si every Q money agent nga jox leen seen xaalis nga cash in nga taxaw foo nekk noonu nga seen ko mu dem Orange Money Sénégal si
nekkul fen si boor yi nekkul fen fii
ma ne kaay ma woon asalaamaaleykum Zainab Q money agent yaa ngi nii nag
agsi na
bi ñëw na
waaw nu mu gaawee
léegi nag soo bëggee yónnee Sénégal rek defal star 323 hash rek then dina la woon option bi foo yónnee Sénégal
lii daal neex na
yombal na
te gaaw
Orange Money ak Q money yombal nañ àdduna senal dem na
kay
Q money rek
Q money moo mun ko ko gis mu daw mbaa mu dal kawam moo mun
Q money ngara na sino dimbade ko gonga no dimbade dem na
And welcome back. You're watching QTV and you are watching The Week in Review. I'm Ari Darami and here going through the stories, 5 of them already so far. Mahmoud Mboj, Mr. Mboj, thank you for your interjections. And here doing the signing we have Lamindi Sonko. And as usual, I always say to people, don't panic if you missed the 5 that have just gone. We have 5 really good ones still to come, I promise you. Including this one, 10th of October is normally commemorated globally as World Mental Health Day. And they want us to look at the range, the gamut of mental health. So it's not always just about illness when they say mental health. they mean the mental good health as well. And this year it was commemorated here in the Gambia. Have a look, have a listen.
Mental health refers to a state of well-being that allows individuals to manage life stresses, recognize their potential, and actively contribute to their communities. The Gambia has seen an increase in mental health disorders, with experts attributing this to various factors, including drug abuse, trauma, discrimination, and neglect. Dr. Sylvia Lorenzi Jaune is a clinical psychologist and the founder of the Peace of Mind organization, a mental health group dedicated to supporting individuals with mental health disorders.
Sometimes I laugh and I say that, the Gambian society is not very mental health friendly, but just to mean that there is a lot to do when it comes to raise awareness, create more knowledge and education surrounding mental health.
Mental health experts assert that anyone, regardless of age, gender, or ethnicity, can develop a behavioral health disorder. This year's World Mental Health Day theme is "It is time to prioritize mental health in the workplace."
Prioritizing mental health in the workplace, because it's one of the places where it can go unnoticed and undealt with, where people come to work, they might be going through stuff, but they think, I don't want my colleagues to know, so I'll put on a brave face, I'll go through it, and then you hear they've done something rash or shocking, and you think, oh, I never knew they were going through that. So very much a case, isn't it, Mr. Amber?
Absolutely. Ade, when I think in Wolof, the concepts, the terms regarding mental health, impoverished, is just really one word, mad.
Yeah.
The person is
well,
mad.
This is it.
So I do not have the to be honest, the conceptual resources, as it were, within Wolof to really appreciate mental health in this subtle form.
Yeah.
I really do not have it. Maybe somebody else does.
Well,
perhaps this is my shortcoming. But immediately you see the big obstacle, the hardest hurdle of all, our attitudes, how we see it.
Yes,
isn't it? So even speaking, because she appeared, Dr. Lorenzo, the lady, the clinical psychologist, appeared on this morning.
Yeah,
we were on talking about it. And that's it. She repeated there what we had agreed on, that we're not very mental health friendly. We are not like that, and that's the reason. But still, there have been some people responding to the services that she was offering.
Yes, indeed.
So that one goes back to that.
That's right.
So the little that we have, how can we make it work?
Sure.
Then it will be an example. It will show others what is possible. It must demonstrate, as it were, its efficacy.
Absolutely.
Then maybe that's when you can begin to change attitudes, as it were.
Sure.
So the little that we have, the little that's there are some people coming in. So do what you can. Show us why it is important, because you really face a very, very difficult situation here, the norms, how we see it. And we'll see what happens once you start demonstrating to people that you work.
Then that's a very good one, and I think if people didn't see that, they should go back and check out the Dr. Lorenzi.
That's it, and you understand it. What does it mean for it to work?
Yeah, quite. Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So some understanding, as it were, it helps how we see it. Isn't it? It just depends on the information I have in my head, how that changes my perspective, and then how do I see it? How do I bring it in?
And sometimes when people come from the West and they come here, they're quite shocked at how little, as you said, not quite mental health friendly at all. Once some say they go too far the other way, but what's the balance that can be struck based on what we do have?
Absolutely. And I think all these concepts, these ideas about focusing on the individual, that emerged out of a kind of individualistic sort of epistemology, as it were.
With us, the individual, that's it. The me generation.
Yes. Whereas in our society, I'm not sure whether I once argued this, that there are really no individuals. You're just a type, a son, a nephew, a dad, a brother. So you are just these roles. So I don't think we really particularly focus on individuals and their well-being and all the rest of it. They'll just tell you to man up.
Yeah, well, this is it. In the same way where people here don't have the concept of a personal space.
Yes,
they'll lean into you, they'll lean over you.
Absolutely.
And people come from the West, they're horrified, like, I don't even know you. You're coming and brushing up against me and pushing, leaning into me. And it's like, but yeah, so that kind of
like a different metaphysical world, if you like. So it's a very interesting, this is what makes us a hybrid. Some of us with Western education, that's really what it is, or the exposure, then we sort of absorb this aspect, but those without that experience are very much a traditional, conventional sort of world that they live in. So that's why the educated are the alienated. They're alienated from, from that heritage. They're necessarily alienated. That's why alienation has been the dominant theme in post-independence literature in many ways.
Very much so. I think that's a good one. The educated are the alienated. Thank you for that, Mr. Mboja. I'll try and remember that one. Story number 7. We here, when the Olympics and the Paralympics took place in Paris this year, in the middle of the year, we kind of cheered on our athletes. They didn't come back with any medals, but nonetheless, we were still proud of what they did. And so it seems folks at the British High Commission here in the Gambia, and they hosted them at a reception. Have a look, have a listen.
Your dedication, your discipline and your determination as athletes to represent the very, very best of the Olympic spirit makes all of us in the Gambia, all of us Gambians, and I count myself as a Gambian, makes us all incredibly proud. We recognize that participating in the Olympics is more about, it's not just about winning a medal, it's about representing your country, it's about embracing unity and striving for personal excellence.
Striving for excellence, and I said in the intro there, we cheered them on even as they weren't going to win, but then we had the debate about what if we had better facilities, what if we could put more funding into this. We would come back like lots of smaller countries with medals, and we didn't.
Absolutely, and perhaps it would be very interesting to hear from High Commissioner Harriet King, Mrs. Harriet King, that we've got a package will help you in this way.
That's what I was hoping. That's what I was hoping to hear. In fact, I thought that was the reason for hosting that event, but we didn't quite hear that. But perhaps that's coming.
All the same, I'm sure the athletes themselves would appreciate it.
Sure.
I think it is important that I see it from their angle.
And they certainly did.
Yes, they did.
Yes.
Never mind the motives, as it were, of the High Commission.
Right.
So perhaps it's a good PR. It's showing that there's this engagement, social engagement with what's going on here, which is not a bad thing at all. Yes. But this is it. We need sort of structural things to change, as it were, and what's happening in many ways. So most of our athletes, we don't have much, and that now in the world to compete internationally, really, and be like a figure of substance, as it were, at the very top. Yes. You really need systems in the country that would begin from when you're very young.
This is true.
Otherwise, you're seriously disadvantaged, really, when it comes to
you might be talented, but you only get so far.
Absolutely, you can only get so far. Only few, you see, look at it. Yankuba Minte, that's a very few, he's just one. You know what I mean? So this is the key. It is about the structures right at the bottom, going up. Everywhere you see, be Jamaica, anywhere, St. Lucia, they have stuff like that. We must be serious about these things. Symbolisms, as we acknowledged earlier, symbolism is not bad, but let's just take it for what it is. The substantive stuff remains to be done.
Exactly. Thank you for that. And now on to something that says a lot needs to be done, rather. There's a national action plan to combat plastic pollution. I'm not making this up. Have a look, have a listen.
In 2015, the Gambia made history by enacting one of the most significant legislative frameworks, banning the sale and use of plastic. This move garnered widespread praise from environmental advocates worldwide. However, nearly a decade later, challenges in enforcing the ban persist. Nevertheless, stakeholders remain steadfast in their commitment to ensure full enforcement and protect the country's coastlines, which continue to be impacted by plastic waste. The National Action Plan was collaboratively developed with the UK-based Common Seas Organization, endorsed by the UN. Dr. Dauda Baji, Executive Director of the National Environment Agency, emphasized that the National Action Plan serves as a comprehensive framework for addressing plastic pollution in the Gambia. He expressed gratitude to the government for its strong commitment and support in developing this initiative. Dr. Baji noted that the implementation of this plan, alongside existing national laws like the 2007 anti-littering law, will significantly enhance efforts to combat plastic pollution.
Mr. Ambush, we really need that action plan, don't we? One only has to look around and see the kind of plastic pollution, both on land and at sea. And you see the horror stories that we hear from around the world. It's about time we had an action plan of our own to deal with it.
Yes, and I just couldn't understand that, because according to our report, it was in 2015 that we enacted this sort of historic, as it were, law. Is this the first time that we're having an action plan? And look, this is a 5-year action plan.
It's the first.
I mean, have we had a previous action plan and all of that?
Sorry to disappoint you there.
Absolutely.
No,
the reason why I asked,
yes.
In our report, we also said that by 2021, we generated 23,000 tons of waste. So whatever plans were there, not working.
Yeah, indeed, indeed.
Really, this is 2021.
And you know, one of the debates that came up is that this whole theme that you've touched on there, we pass all these laws and these statutes and we pat ourselves on the back and people congratulate us, but what they don't do is come to the Gambia and see how little is being implemented, and that's why it's only now that we're coming up with a national action plan for something like this.
And it would be interesting to go into the provisions, as it were, of this action plan. What have they got in it? Because when you look at what really the difficulty is, coming back to us.
Yes, right.
How many times do we just throw these things around?
Because
look at the anti-littering law we mentioned, 2007.
That's right.
Look around us. Have you seen any difference? There hasn't been any difference.
Well, this is it.
I come up with these things, but we don't have an efficient and effective enforcement mechanism. It doesn't exist. And you have these laws, but again, people's attitudes, they do not quite chime. They do not quite. We just throw things, we're not ashamed of it. You know what I mean?
Sure.
And even sometimes you want to sort of have a go at somebody for doing it, they tell you, hell, it's none of your business. So our attitude towards public space is extraordinary. It's an extraordinary attitude. So really, to some extent, I feel sorry for the National Environment Agency. You really have a very, very difficult thing to do if you want to change certain things.
Because apparently, amongst other things, they're trying to promote recycling as one of the options. But of course, to do that, you have to have a system. That's a nationwide system, not just left to local councils. It's the same across the board. You have places where you go and you send stuff, plastic bottles and so on, that can be recycled, and all of that. And as you said, we need to know the detail. It's good that we're having an action plan now, but what does it entail?
Does it mean exactly?
So we need to bring them in and interrogate them and say, what exactly is in the action plan beyond something, yet another thing that you've passed this and you validated it at a workshop, and then nothing happens.
That's it, Adib. If I want to achieve something, well, that will also depend on the institutional or governance structures that I have in place.
Indeed.
How effective are they? These are the things that we consider. So if they are not, then you are not going to see the effect.
Exactly.
So all these action plans, for a very long time, we've been saying that the implementation is not working. I wonder if they have a special plan to say that, okay, ours is going to work. Because we've seen really where the problem, the weakness, Achilles heel of most of our institutions. We will implement and seeing the outcome, see what to some extent. You can never have 100% outcomes.
So if I ever get my hands on it, I'll go straight to the page that says implementation and then the other page that says monitoring. And then I'll see what plans they have for both of those.
Even when you say implementation, what do you have in place?
Structures.
Is it effective? You see, that is why you need competence in sort of in organization, being able to get things done. That's everybody thinks that you can. But it's just when we put you in the position, you never have anything to show for it.
This is it. Thank you for that. That takes us to story number 9, our penultimate story. And yes, the tourism season is upon us. The first official tourist flight landed at Banjul International Airport. Have a look, have a listen.
The
arrival of the Gambia Experience Interflight from the Gatwick International Airport in London officially opens the 2024-2025 tourism season with an estimated number of over 200,000 tourist arrivals from the Scandinavian and European countries. Is this your first time coming to the Gambia?
It's her first time, my 8th.
From the airport, most tourists are heading straight to their hotels in the tourism development area. As you could see, most of them moving around, carrying their bags, heading straight to their hotels.
Her first time, my 8th. So, Mr. Mboj, we have lots of repeat visitors. I almost said repeat offenders. Repeat visitors. They come here, they like it, and they come again, and maybe they even bring their friends, because but we don't see the kind of escalation in figures that we want, and we have to ask, really, apart from other things, do we have the capacity if we had this kind of upsurge that we've been hoping for, praying for? And also, are we doing enough to change, or are we just content with having the people who've always come here to keep coming here?
Absolutely. We've known for a while now that a good number of them really repeat, as you call it, repeat tourists. Have been here so many times. And surveys done, quite interesting, this time the first flight is from the UK. I've heard that normally in the past, the first flight used to come from Scandinavia. So somewhere.
Absolutely
that's sort of quite interesting there. And perhaps 40-something% of our tourists from the UK.
That's
and
right.
So the survey done there, why do you go to Gambia? It's just sun, sea, sand, and that sort of thing, isn't it? So that's the reality there. But here, the ministry, there's something else they want to do, call it heritage tourism. So how are they going to do it? You've seen them sort of restoring, revamping
monuments and so on.
Monuments and that sort of thing. Then you wonder, is it part of a coherent, broader strategy? You know what I mean? For these things to work. But how would you reorient sort of tastes and
I mean, I'm tempted to jump in here, because we had the press conference during the week when the MD of the GT board said that, you know, we don't want to become like Cape Verde, a kind of sex tourist destination. And I was enraged, because that's not why people go to Cape Verde. They get over 1 million visitors this year, or they will. And we're getting happy with 230,000 or 232,000 to give the figure that they gave. It's got nothing to do with that. You go there and you see their infrastructure. It's second to none. And then in terms of heritage tourism, there are only a few places that they sell as heritage tourism. Cidade Velha being one, which just means old city, and the former prison camps where the Portuguese kept people as a kind of concentration camp, and that's it. So, you know, they've done other stuff, and we need to get our act together and not saying, oh, sex tourism. Because if you go online and you type sex tourism in the Gambia or sex tourism in Cape Verde, guess what? Which one will have 20 articles and one will have none? You don't need to answer that one. But so we need to get our act together and say, you know, what do we need to do? And really, that's what has to happen.
And as a public official, you don't go around calling people names or nation names,
especially without presenting any evidence.
You cannot do that. I went online the other day and I saw this video made by an American who came to Cape Verde and has been to other African countries. He said, really, what stood out? One of the things, he mentioned many things, but I just mentioned one. He said what stood out for him was that people in Cape Verde were very, very friendly. They befriended him, but not because of the little money that they could get. He said that struck him, because in other African countries, people befriended you because of the money they could get. To me, it was embarrassing, if you understand what I'm saying. But I wouldn't turn around and say, oh, this man is a hater, or he's lying. You have to accept some of these things. So if I were that public official, I'll probably worry more about stuff like that than calling other people names so that I will look good That's really what they were doing.
You
cannot do that. That's below the belt. That's not really what the issue is. How do you turn things around? Sure. One doesn't see any coherent ideas. I do not see how it's going to work. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, we welcome them.
200,000, they say?
Yeah, 232,000 was the figure, the actual figure given as to what they're estimating. So yeah,
but still, that's below pre-COVID, isn't it? I think pre-COVID we had 300,000, didn't we, at some point? Something like that.
That's right. Yeah. Well, thank you for that, Sir Budge. And now on to our final story and another part of Africa. We go to Uganda. Uganda has just celebrated 62 years of independence from British colonial rule. Have a look, have a listen.
4 years later, in 1966, Obote seized power, installing himself as the country's second president in a coup that would set the tone for Uganda's turbulent political landscape. Obote ruled for a decade before being ousted in 1971 by his army commander, General Idi Amin. Amin's brutal dictatorship, marked by human rights abuses, economic decline, and the expulsion of Ugandan Asians, left an indelible scar on the nation's history. Amin's reign ended in 1979 when he was overthrown by Tanzanian forces and Ugandan exiles. After a brief period of political instability, Milton Obote returned to power in 1980, but was once again overthrown 5 years later by General Tito Okello. Yet, Uganda's most significant turning point came in 1986, when Yoweri Museveni, leading the National Resistance Army, overthrew the government and took power.
Sternberg, I was almost tempted to call that piece 62 years of independence and 38 years of Museveni.
Absolutely.
Since 1986, he's been there and he's still there, and he shows no sign of stepping down. Him and Paul Biya. I think Paul Biya wants to make sure that he's not overtaken. He's only done a mere 42 years, Paul Biya, in Cameroon. But Museveni, so they'd had all this instability. I think he's number 8 or 9 in terms of head of state, but for the last 38 years it's just been him, and now it's alleged that his son will take over when he steps down. The African story all over.
Yes, and you remember in the beginning he was the darling of the West.
He really was. He really was.
You know, he's showered him with all sorts of praise.
Right. Because he kind of came after Amin, I guess not immediately after, but after Amin and Obote, who both had, you know, kind of problematic relations with the West. But 62 years, and I've been involved very heavily with the community in the UK, and they're very progressive. And in fact, they organize the best investment forum of any African diaspora. And they've been able to successfully get people to go back and invest in Uganda in tens of millions, actually. And they've invited the Asians back, and many of them have gone back.
Absolutely. When I look at some of the reports about Museveni's reign, he's done some good things economically in other areas. That's something that he's done. It's just that afterwards, with time, perhaps the energy, the creativity is no longer there. Something happens with time, and the authoritarianism, of course, you would expect that, because others also want to, you know, come and rule, and they think that perhaps you're not doing it as well as before. It's time to move. It's public office.
Well, his son said that.
Absolutely.
His son said, "I think my father's been in power too long," and people were shocked because he said it publicly. He didn't say it in a kind of secret gathering.
Yes, but again, this has been sort of really the bane of Africa, isn't it? Generally, sort of everywhere you touch, they've got their own episode, as it were, of these general symptoms, as just sort of slightly different from country to country. Yes. But this is what we've seen, you know. But maybe we just don't stop there on Independence Day, because Churchill called it what, the Pearl of Africa.
That's right.
Beautiful scenery, I've heard, wildlife, diversity, just so much to do. Gorgeous place, like I've heard. So, yes, we look to that, as it were, and see that the journey will be long. You know, I don't want the platform to be sort of always condemnatory. We're always condemning things. I want to hold on to something hopeful, as it were, so that I'll have the energy to wake up in the morning and go and do something positive.
As Jesse Jackson used to say, keep hope alive.
Absolutely.
Thank you for that, Mr. Mboch. And that brings us nicely to the end of the program. Just say to you, the viewers, thank you for watching. To Mr. Mboch, thank you for your interjections. And to you, Lamindi Sonko, thank you for your translations and interpretations. Until we come your way again next week. Goodbye.